So today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating and, frankly, groundbreaking report from the Federal Reserve. And it reveals a connection that I bet you've probably never even considered. A direct link between our financial habits and our brain health.
I know, it sounds a little bit like science fiction, right? But what if the very first signs of a serious memory disorder didn't show up in a doctor's office, but in your credit card statement? Or maybe in your mortgage payments? That is the wild, counterintuitive question we're going to explore today.
And look, this isn't about forgetting to pay one or two bills. No, researchers have found this consistent pattern of small, almost unnoticeable financial mistakes that act as a kind of canary in the coal mine for cognitive decline, sometimes 7 years before a person is ever formally diagnosed.
To really get why this is so important, we first have to look at this really critical and often invisible period of time, the years leading up to an actual diagnosis.
The conditions we're talking about all fall under this big umbrella called Alzheimer's disease and related disorders, or ADRD for short. Basically, these are progressive diseases that slowly chip away at the very functions we rely on for complex tasks, especially things like managing our money.
And this timeline, it just shows the challenge so perfectly. The real changes in the brain can start a decade or even more before a diagnosis is ever made. It's this long, quiet period where a person might just feel a little off, but the symptoms aren't quite clear enough for a doctor to make a definitive call.
And the scale of this is it's immense. ADRD affects more than 1 in 10 Americans over the age of 65. That is millions of people, and many of them are right now in that pre-diagnosis stage, totally unaware of the risks they're facing, both medically and financially.
So how in the world did researchers uncover this hidden connection? Well, the answer lies in a massive and very cleverly analyzed set of data.
The team behind this report did something pretty remarkable. They took anonymous credit report data from Equifax and they merged it with Medicare health records. This let them track the financial health of millions of older adults and see exactly what was happening in the years leading up to an ADRD diagnosis.
Okay, now what's really interesting here is the story this slide tells. Take a look at that top chart. See the vertical line at 0? That's the moment of diagnosis. Now look to the left of it. You can see this slow but unmistakable decline in credit scores starting as early as 7 years, that's 28 quarters, before the diagnosis. And it accelerates. In the year just before someone is diagnosed, their average credit score drops by nearly 6 points. Now that might not sound like a lot, but in the world of credit, trust me, that's a huge signal. It can lead to higher interest rates and denied loans right when a family is at its most vulnerable.
So what's driving that drop in credit scores? The bottom chart gives us the answer. Over that exact same pre-diagnosis period, the chances of missing a payment start to climb. You see it? It's almost a perfect mirror image of the credit score decline. Little mistakes, a forgotten bill here, a late payment there, they really start to add up. Just think about what this really means. Only 1 year before diagnosis, people with undiagnosed ADRD were over 13% more likely to miss a payment compared to their own normal behavior. That is a huge behavioral shift, hidden in plain sight, that starts a whole cascade of late fees and financial stress. The researchers then drilled down even further, looking at specific kinds of debt. And it turns out the warning signs were loudest in the 2 areas that make up the biggest chunk of debt for seniors: their credit cards and their home mortgages. And the numbers here they're stark. 2 years before a diagnosis, the probability of missing a credit card payment shot up by 21%. For mortgages, it was an 11% increase. These are not minor blips. They are significant signals of financial distress. But the story, it gets even more complex. This financial fallout from undiagnosed ADRD isn't felt equally by everyone. The data reveals some really stark and frankly troubling disparities. Take a look at this comparison. The blue line, that shows the credit score decline for white individuals, and it follows the pattern we've been seeing. But the green line, representing black individuals, see how it shows a much sharper and deeper decline? The financial consequences just appear to be far more severe. Let's put some numbers to that. 3 years before diagnosis, the credit score drop for black individuals was more than double the drop for white individuals. The report suggests this might be partly because black individuals are often diagnosed at a later stage of the disease, which just allows more time for all that financial harm to build up.
Now let's switch gears and look at gender. What's so fascinating here is that before the diagnosis, the financial impact on men and women is pretty much identical.
But look at what happens after the diagnosis. Men's credit scores, that's the blue line, they start to stabilize and even recover a little. But women's scores, the green line, they stay lower for longer.
So why would that be? Well, the report offers a few potential explanations that are rooted in pretty common household dynamics. It suggests that in households where men have traditionally managed the finances, a diagnosis might trigger a faster intervention from the family. But in contrast, wives are statistically much more likely to become unpaid caregivers for their husbands, and that adds this immense financial and emotional strain that can really impact their own credit.
Okay, so what does all of this mean? We have this incredible data pointing to a very serious problem. The final question is, what can we do with this knowledge?
First, let's just be really clear about what's at stake. These pre-diagnosis financial slips, they aren't harmless. They lead to late fees, higher interest rates, and damaged credit. And that can make it harder to get loans right when a family might need the most to pay for care. In the worst cases, it can even risk foreclosure. It's like pouring financial gasoline on an already devastating emotional fire.
And this leads to the report's most powerful suggestion. If these financial patterns are such a reliable early signal, could we, ethically and effectively, use credit data to create an early warning system? A system that could flag people who might benefit from a clinical evaluation years earlier than they otherwise would.
This idea is more urgent now than ever before. As the report itself says, new treatments are becoming available that can actually slow cognitive decline, but they work best when they're started in the early stages of the disease. The sooner you know, the more you can do.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. We get our blood pressure checked, we get our cholesterol checked. Could a simple review of our financial patterns, of our credit report, one day become just as vital for protecting our long-term health? This study suggests the answer might just be yes.